Okay, I'm going to bring some information to the masses via YouTube of a book that I read. I guess apparently it was put out in 1999. I thought I had read it mid-90s, but apparently not. Can't remember if I read this in California or after I moved to the Pacific Northwest. No, South Pacific, yeah, Pacific Northwest. Get a close-up of this. That should be sufficient to keep it in the default photo for the video. This is a book, as you can see, it's called Days of Hunger, Days of Chaos: The Coming Great Food Shortages in America by Tex Mars. Back when this was written, and I'm going to go over each chapter, and we can start that right now. So we can cancel this out, go to chapter 1. This book is basically about how big agri corporations and corporations in general were at the time, throughout the later 80s and 90s and into the 2000s, were gaining control of, remember the no farmers, no food. The Live Aid was to help farmers. Well, the little farmer was getting smashed, and big agri was taking them over. And the basic gist of this book is that they were doing that because corporations are in bed with the government, and at some future date of their choosing, they would cut off the food supply. And it's starting to look like the date of their choosing is upon us. So we'll go over each chapter. I'm not going to go over each chapter. I'm just going to bring you to the first page of each chapter. It's really up to you if you want to read this book, but I'll show a few of the pages inside. So this is the first chapter, The Coming Great Hunger. Throughout the video, if you want to click it on, stop and read this, that's fine. But I can't be live letting you read it, because that would take too long for the video. I want to try to hopefully get this in under 15 minutes. So this is chapter 1, The Coming Great Hunger. Chapter 2. Famine and pestilence are predetermined. So like we see with the virus coming out of Wuhan, it really looks like somebody was working on this on purpose, and there's some debate whether it got out on accident, out on purpose, and certain media talking heads and websites are still insisting, it's a conspiracy theory, it's frickin' bat soup. But it hasn't been investigated, and WHO doesn't want to investigate it. WHO and China are in bed together, and I wish I could remember the name of the video. But WHO is covering for China. WHO, China, and the CDC, all globalist deep state organizations. China has its own deep state, and just my view, I think that China's deep state is working with our deep state to destroy the country. And in the end, if they don't get what they want with this virus, plan B, or maybe it's the plan from the get-go, is to cause a war between China and the United States, where China invades and takes over China and probably Russia, probably other satellite nations of their sphere influence would also join in. And Chinese generals and the current leadership are on record saying that they would basically kill everybody in this country that's not Chinese and take our land and resources for their living space. And maybe I can visit upon that. But this one, chapter 2, Famine and pestilence are predetermined. So go to, now here's some pages. World hunger to usher in new age slavery, and that certainly would do it. You can stop this and read that. It's only one page. Like I said, if you want to read the rest, you got to get the book. I found my book on eBay. My mom has it in her house, but I couldn't find it, so I bought another one. Let's see, so we're now at chapter 3. A measure of wheat, a measure of barley. We're fast approaching the day, if you're keeping up with what's going on with the food supply. And one of the best channels I've seen is Ice Age Farmer. Go to his channel on YouTube and watch his information. We're heading towards a day where To eat for the day 3 meals is going to cost you your entire day's wage. Chapter 4. Big Brother is watching our food supplies. They've been watching and studying it for years. Page of information. So, Spy in the Sky, Zero on Farm cheats. You know how they're cities that are on board with sustainable development and Agenda 21 and Agenda 30. They make laws against having gardens either in your front yard. Some places more restricted. You can't even have them in your backyard. This is why they're trying to run ranchers off their lands, like the Bundys. Why they're trying to run farmers. That's why they got all these regulations that say, oh, you can't plant because a little mouse showed up in your field. That's what it's all about. Call me crazy and disagree if you want, but what's coming is coming. And it's all going to be borne out for what it is as we progress. Chapter 5. Demon Seeds, the seeds conspiracy in the Terminator gene. This is all about Monsanto, making its own seeds and then forcing farmers to use those seeds. All about control of food supply. Chapter 6. Global cartel controls and manipulates world food supplies. And like I said, it's been a while since I read this book, so I don't like to read books twice. But the whole book is good. It's all good stuff. Whatever he says in there, he's backing it up with all the facts of the time. Chapter 7. The new colonialism. Small farmers are crushed, and they've been crushed for years now. You've heard about the chickens getting euthanized by the millions. These farmers don't own the chickens. They just run the chicken operation for the big agri companies. So when they come in and say, we got to gas your chickens because we can't afford the feed, because we don't have a meat packing plant to send them to, or nobody wants the eggs, farmer can't do nothing. He just has to watch helplessly as they murder his birds. Food is power. They shall control food, life, and death. Food is power. We use it to change behavior. Some may call that bribery. We do not apologize. These were the threatening, blustery words of Catherine Bertini, Executive Director of the United Nations World Food Program. If you know anything about the UN, you've kept up with them over the years. You've seen a lot of things come out of their mouth that is threatening like this. Absolutely true that food is power. It's been used in the past. And even before this book was written, I knew that it could be used in the future. Chapter 9, the new civilization. They're going to get everything they want out of the coming food shortages. And just my opinion, COVID-19 was or is all about bringing on the food shortages. They needed to figure out how are we going to get from point A to point B where we want to go. And they sit in these closed rooms and they figure out how they're going to do it. Somebody said, what if we introduce a virus? Of course, that's what they've been working on. SARS, those are all test runs. Some of them might have been initiated to see if they could get it going. Maybe those failed, but this is COVID-19. That's the one they're going to run with. Because at the time of their choosing, and the time of their choosing would be, as we right now have entered a solar minimum. There's some debate whether we're in a grand solar minimum or a solar minimum. I've looked and cannot find any scientific evidence or proof that we are in an acknowledged grand solar minimum, but we are in a solar minimum. One or two scientists have come forward saying this solar minimum will lead to the grand solar minimum, but of course when somebody says something like that, the power structure doesn't want to acknowledge it, doesn't want people to know, then they attack those scientists, and that's what's been happening, which leads me to speculate that yes, this solar minimum will lead to a grand solar minimum. Chapter 10, Darkness Descending, Panic Solutions and the Restructuring of America. When people are starving, they're gonna get what they want with Restructuring America. And some of what that's going to look like is these small communal communist-run communities where you don't own your own house anymore, you don't have any property, you live in these dorms near a factory or near where you work, and you're allotted 50 gallons of water a day, and you're allotted so much food, and you're not allowed to use any more than it takes to sustain your life. Certainly not allowed to own anything like a phone. Everything's issued to you, or you don't need it. People that go above that will be scorned as people that are decadent, that are, watch that movie 1984. I mean, that's pretty much it. And that's what they want to plan to do. And property rights, and now how they're going to do all this, and when we have rich people that we know are not going to, they're not going to be subject to this. How they're going to get away with that, I don't know, but probably going to have something to do with brainwashing. And watch the video by Stefan Molyneux, A Story of Your Enslavement, where it talks about when the power structure wants to control you, it will use the cows on the farm. Us being the cows, we're on a human farm, and the elite are running that farm, and the cows self-police themselves, and that's what will happen during this kind of a thing. Well, what about Bill Gates living in his mansion? Shut up! Don't ask that question. Don't ask that question, or you might get found dead in the back of the factory. That's how it works. Okay, so a World Food Authority. I think Tex Mars had speculated that when the situation comes down, that like the government always does, they start forming a government body to work the problem, or to control the situation as it actually is. So we're looking at a World Food Authority coming around right around the corner, and hoarding to be prohibited. That's already in executive orders, and it was recently strengthened by a order that President Trump signed. It didn't specifically address hoarding food, but it was very broadly worded to include anything that you shouldn't be having extra of, which will give them the authority, or so they think, to come in and just take all your food, which is why they have to have these red flag laws, because anybody that's flapping their gums about it will be red flagged, so that they don't have the guns to resist it. And the day somebody does resist it, uses the Second Amendment to protect their rights, well, that's when they'll pass a law banning all the guns. And they've already got that law, though I don't know the title of it offhand. It's the one that bans everything. You can see it on Guns and Gadgets in the last couple weeks. If you're a gun owner, you probably already know the bill that I'm talking about. Page. Oh yeah, hoarding to be prohibited. Just leave this up in case you want to read a little bit of that. Page 6. Implanted biochips to keep track of animals and people. They've already done this with animals. Of course, when Tex Mars wrote the book, he could not have foreseen COVID-19, but he could foresee the nanochips that they want to implant in us. Now, there's debunkers that say, there's no plans to do this, but that's meaningless, because as soon as a law is introduced, a bill is introduced, then they'll have plans to do it. And it doesn't, when the situation is dire, they'll get what they want. Page 7, what might precipitate the final crisis? One of the principal ways a food shortage can be generated is adverse weather conditions. And it talks about, the manipulation of the weather with technology, which has been ongoing. Combine that with the solar minimum that we entered, and then throw a virus in that, and that's how they can create a famine situation, because it was already bad enough before COVID-19, but with COVID-19 and people not working at the meat packing plants, and then the crop yields going down, there wasn't a big harvest this year because a lot of the crops didn't come out of the ground from last winter, because the winter hit so early and nobody got their stuff out. But go watch Ice Age Farmer, and he details all that. Page 8. Plagues, pestilence are highly possible as killers of crops whether purposely spread by governments or naturally occurring. And that brings us back to what was going on in the Wuhan lab, where even our government was funding it. Materials going back and forth, Chinese and American scientists, some of them have been arrested by the FBI. Of course, they'll probably be just whatever they've done if it plays into what is going on as it relates to the coming crisis. It's going to be covered up. Wildlife as a potential source of meat may also be affected. Kind of the bat soup theory, although I don't believe that theory at all. Whatever it is that generates the coming severe food shortage, COVID-19, it is surely that America has practically no reserves, and we don't. Page 9. To quell the growing unrest and restore law and order, Washington, D.C. will request United Nations to intervene. So that's how they're, you couldn't see that a year ago, but now you can see how that could develop. And it's absolutely, their plan was always to bring the UN troops in. They just need to come up with a crisis that allows them to do it. The U.S. Armed Forces have been preparing for urban conflict for a couple decades, at least a decade and a half. So there you have it, and that's the reason. And that's why we had stuff like that thing in 2016, I forget the name of it, but where they were doing that big exercise. Chapter 12. Your keys to survival and prosperity. The Herculean efforts of the government bureaucrats to warehouse, control, and distribute food supplies according to individual need will not succeed. Of course it won't. We all know that that won't succeed, either because they don't want it to, or that they know it can't possibly, so that they turn it over to the government, so they get the results that they already predetermined to want. It was Thomas Jefferson that said, If we were to be told by Washington, as in Washington D.C., when to sow and when to reap, we should soon want of bread. So that's a no-brainer. So they're going to get a famine. They're going to get a famine they're going to pretend that they're trying to do all they can to avoid it or make it better, but it's not going to happen. Chapter 11. Food riots, terror, and the collapse of civilization. That's when the UN's going to come in. Now, if there is a collapse of civilization, it's not going to be a real collapse. It's going to be a managed collapse where they want you to believe that everything's out of control. Just like every leftist crisis, they manage it like a stage operation. And here's the last page. I kind of played with this, so you might be able to read it. You want to click stop, you'll be able to read that. And so that is the book, Days of Hunger, Days of Chaos. Predicted what's happening right now, like spot on. It couldn't have foreseen how they were going to do it exactly, but I always knew that someday there would be a famine. To all the people that prepare, that have been putting food away, and they live in the countryside, they got a plan for you and me too, where they're just going to cause forest fires. The police agencies lock you out. You can't even get into your property if you're not there, and if you are there, they tell you to get out upon pain of arrest. And if you don't get out, the fires are so bad because they're started from. By all accounts, it really looks like they are started from weapons, in the space-based weapons that can start fires of horrible ferocity, and that's how they're going to get rid of. If you think you're prepared, you may not be prepared, and it may just be overnight that you're just destitute, walking around barefoot with nothing to your name. So good luck, everybody.